everybody. My name is Nancy Hernandez, and today I will be doing my book talk presentation on this wonderful book that I got at my local library. It's called Areli is a Dreamer, a True Story by Areli Morales, a DACA recipient, illustrated by Luisa Uribe. So, this book is the short summary, a brief summary of what the book is about. Is about a young little girl named Areli and her older brother Alex are being raised by their grandmother in Mexico, and mom and dad are living and working in New York City. And every Sunday, mom and dad call. They call the Areli and her brother to see if they got the toys that they sent them, to see how they're doing. And Areli asked, she would ask them, when are you coming back home? And mom and dad made it clear to Areli that they were not coming back. They couldn't go back to Mexico. That one day her and her brother will go to America and join them. And so after a while, they're being raised with a grandma, brother, and Areli, and they're playing and playing hide and go seek and chasing chickens and so on. And when one day it comes the day that Alex now has to pack his stuff and join mom and dad in America, and she doesn't understand why she can't go with him. And so she asks Grandma, why can't I go with them? And Grandma makes it clear to her it's because Alex he was born in America. He's a citizen, and you were born in Mexico, so he can go as he pleases. He can go back and forth, but you have to stay here. So he's gonna go with mom and dad, and later on, you will go with them. And she was very sad that she had to stay behind. So now, after he leaves, every Sunday, she's the one waiting for that phone call from her mom and her dad and her brother by herself. And as the time goes on, she starts going to school in Mexico. She starts kindergarten and she learns how to read, not to read, she learns her ABCs and her numbers, and she's making friends, and she's having a regular, you know, life as a young child. Um, and it comes the day that grandma picks her from school and tells her it's the time has come. Your mom and dad have sent for you, and they'll be picking you up tomorrow. And Adeli's really sad because at this point, she already got used to living in Mexico, her life in Mexico, her friends, her grandma, her school. She's already used to it. She doesn't want to leave Mexico. And her grandma tells her and tries to make her understand that she was getting old. She's getting older, and that there's no future in Mexico, and that one day Areli will understand. So they have a little gathering with all her family comes and her friends come to say goodbye to Areli. The next day, a man comes that mom and dad have sent for Areli, and he takes her to America. On the book, it doesn't go in detail on how she is brought to America. It doesn't say how, but they do show some pictures of her going on a truck and then being in a bus station and then arriving in New York City. So when she gets to New York City, she is reunited by mom and dad and her brother. And when she sees them, she hugs them and they're all hugging each other, like just so happy to see them. But mom and dad don't look like anything like the pictures back at grandma's house. Her mom's hair is shorter, different texture, different color, and her dad also looks very, very different. He looks he has under eyes, he has lines under his eyes, and he looks much older. And her brother is much taller than the last time she saw him. So just by giving those descriptions in the book, you we can assume that some time has passed, a couple of months to years, that she's seen mom and dad. And she's so happy to be with them. And so she starts going to school. When she goes to school, her teacher didn't know her name. She didn't know Araceli's name, and Araceli didn't speak any English. But she did make friends with a couple little girls that spoke Spanish. And unfortunately, there were some boys that would tease her, some kids that would tease Areli, telling her, "You are illegal. You're so backwards. You don't speak English. Your mom's a maid." And she had never felt so, she had never felt so embarrassed and ashamed of herself before, never in Mexico. So that same day when she gets home, she tells her mom, what does illegal mean? And her mom explains to her that illegal means against the law. And Areli is like, I'm not against the law. And her mom explains to her, you're you're not against the law. You were born in Mexico. You're not a citizen. And Adelie asked her, will I ever be a citizen? And her mom says, hopefully one day you will. But her mom didn't want to talk about it. She didn't really want to go into detail with her. So what if, she asked her brother Alex, what if I'm never a citizen? And he's kind of like sad and he tells her, well, I guess it will take you back to Mexico without us. And you can tell in the story that that day when those kids make that remark, those words were said to her, and she asked her mom and her brother, it scared her because at night she knew that she felt that she could not talk about Mexico anymore, or her home or her life back in Mexico anymore, that she couldn't be who she was anymore, that she had to hide that part of who she was. And that's very sad because she didn't want to be taken back to Mexico. And after that, she goes to school and she makes it her priority, her mission to focus more in school and to work extra hard. And she learned how to read and write, and she was able to do a book report, write a whole book report in English by herself, and read it out loud to her whole classroom. And she was at in fourth grade. She already spoke English like just every other little girl. She would go on the subway with her brother, and she was just like a regular little girl. When she was in fifth grade, that's when her classroom took a field trip to on a boat through the Hudson River to Ellis Island. And on that trip, on that field trip, the tour guy was giving them information, and he was letting them know that over 12 million immigrants had came through here, and that each one of those kids there in that classroom had at least one relative that was an immigrant and came from a foreign land. At that point, Areli, she didn't feel like an illegal anymore. She didn't feel like immigrant. She felt that she was a part of something bigger than that. And she just felt, I guess, like reassured that she's not the first child, she's not the first person that came through this for a better life. She's not. And that night she spoke to her grandma on the phone and she told her, Grandma, I understand now. I understand now that I actually might have a future here, that America's a better place. And that night she's looking out her window and she's thinking and telling herself, I will become someone someday. Maybe I'll be a writer and write my own story. Or maybe I'll be a teacher and I will teach children about this new land as well, because she would like to teach like I'm guessing immigrants by what she was saying, right? About this new land, because this is a new land to children that are immigrants. And she says that someday she will. And That's very inspirational because actually she is the author of the story. She did become a writer. She did write her own story, and she did get a bachelor's, and she's a substitute teacher, and she's working herself to be a teacher. So Areli Morales is very inspirational. She actually did it. That's awesome, and that's something that I really liked about the story. The setting takes place in two locations. It takes place in Mexico, where Areli was born, and then it takes place in New York City from the age of 6 and up, where she was raised in New York City, right? So those are two places where this is taking place at. The characters in the story are Areli, young Areli, and her older brother Alex, her grandma, her mom, and her dad. Those are the main characters. The main events in the story are that Areli was raised in Mexico and she had a life there. And she had to leave that life to come with her mom. So that's a big event. That's a big change for her to go from something she's used to something new. And guessing and I'm assuming that coming to America to New York City, it's a culture shock to her after being reunited with her mom because her parents are very much older and a long since the last time she saw them. And not only that, she has to get used to a new city where it's louder, the life is faster, the buildings are bigger, everything's different than back at home in her little village. And on in the illustrations, you can see her little village out here at the mountains, the chickens, and then you like just a little pueblito in Mexico. And then right here you can see the buildings, like everything's so much bigger and brighter. And that's one of the big main events that happened to her. Another one that happened was those kids making fun of her and telling her she's an illegal, and that changed her. That her finding out or coming to the understanding that she doesn't have legal status here and she can be taken back to Mexico without her family really changed her because it encouraged her to learn the language faster, encouraged her to work harder in school and to catch up to all the little girls and be as normal as possible. And then hiding who she was, like she couldn't talk about certain things like her life back in Mexico for the fear of being taken back. And another event that happened is her going on that field trip and finding out that she's not the only immigrant that came to America, that millions and millions of immigrants have came to America for a better life and they actually have succeeded just like herself. And that inspired her to be a writer, to tell her story and to teach other children. So that's awesome. Again, um, the student characteristics of this book would be immigration, immigrant children, immigrant students. That's the main characteristics. Um, the main conflict or challenge in the story is that she came to America. She did not know the language. She didn't know how to speak. That was a big challenge for her to get. And then she's behind um, on a lot of things when it comes to her education, and she had to catch up to that um, much faster than other kids so she could feel normal and speak English so she wouldn't be taken away. The main lesson that the character learns is that she can do anything someday, and she did. That's the main lesson is no one can tell you you can't do something or you cannot do it because of your migration status. No, just because they you don't have that status here doesn't mean you cannot do it. That means in this particular case, it gave her more motivation and more inspiration to achieve her goals, and she did. And I would like to read a passage from the book, and it's this one. It's after the little boys were teasing her. It says, when she went home that night, Adele asked her mother what the kids meant when they said that she was illegal. means against the law, her mom began. I'm not against the law, Areli said. Of course you're not, said her mom. But you were born in Mexico, so even though you're growing up in America, you're not a citizen of this country. Do I do I get to be a citizen someday? Areli asked. I hope so, mija. I hope so. Her mother wouldn't say anything else, so Areli asked Alex why she needed to be a citizen. If you're a citizen, you can do whatever Americans do, he said. What if I'm not? Areli asked. She wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. Then I guess you could be taken back to Mexico, said Alex. He wouldn't look at her without us. Areli didn't understand, but she knew she should stay quiet about her first home in Mexico. She didn't want to be sent back to Mexico all by herself. She did not want to break the law just by being who she was. So, see how she's crying with the mom and her brothers just can't look at her. And the reason I chose this passage because that shows that it actually just gives you a little glimpse of what our children or students that are immigrants are facing back at home, what they're going through in their daily life when they're coming into our classrooms and they are immigrants and they might be, might they're not doing well. It could also be because of their legal status because they're scared or if they're being paid fun of. Maybe we should, step in and say something. It just gives you a glimpse of what and child being an immigrant, a child immigrant in America feels like. It gives you that feeling of it's not fair and she's a child and she shouldn't be going through that, but unfortunately she is going through that and she is scared. Now she has to hide who she is or that part of her that she can't talk about. Her life back in Mexico, her grandma, her being raised in Mexico, being born there. And the reason I chose this book because it's one of my favorite books that I've ever read. I really, really enjoyed this book, but because it hits home. Obviously, where I am from the Rio Grande Valley, I'm a first generation American, meaning my mom is Mexican and my dad are Mexican, and they both came here illegally to America. And my older siblings faced just with the same thing that Areli faced when she came here because they were also immigrants and they also were scared of being deported. My siblings are now have legal status here, and one of my sisters is also a DACA recipient. So this book really does hit home, and this is typically what a lot of the students in our classrooms that are walking in, especially if we're planning to teach here in the valley, since the valley's right next to the border, are going through. Or you might have a friend that is going through this or has gone through this, or and most of the students here, some of them are first generation Americans, some are American, and some of them are barely coming across. So we should really take that in consideration and kind of see their point of view. And I think this book does that. It gives a good point of view. And I think everybody would benefit from this story. I think if we are, how I said, planning a teacher, I think we should definitely read this because more than odd, if we're planning to teach in the valley, in the Rio Grande Valley, we are going to have students that are immigrants. We're going to have students that parents were immigrants, or we're going to have at least one student in the classroom, and it would benefit that everybody would read this book or that we would read them out to them so they could understand that they just see that it's not it's scary. It's scary. It could kind of like help them, encourage them, inspire them, that it's gonna get easier, it's gonna get better. There's hope. You can get status. You can be a writer. You can be a teacher. You can be just about anything. So that's good. I think everybody should read it. All the teachers teachers should read this. Students, um, it's a good book. And how I said, in the valley we have a lot of immigrants, and It hits home. It's a really good book. And what I like most about this book is that it's a true story. It's very inspirational. It inspires me. Inspires, very inspirational. I think if a child would read it, it would really inspire them, especially if they're immigrants. It would inspire them to be like, hey, I can do that too. I'm not the first one, just like her. She's not the first immigrant. And that's came here with the dream, and she has accomplished. So, most more than all, the child will also accomplish that dream. So, that is my book talk presentation. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in my next video. Thank you. Bye.